organization. So I hope he lands in a great spot. I think he can excel. I think when you look at the fact, too, of what he had around him or what he didn't have around him during his time with the Raiders, it was a struggle. I mean, over the course of his tenure, they had the worst defense in the NFL. He never truly had a number one wide receiver until probably this past year where he's learning a new offense with Josh McDaniels and maybe 1 year with Amari Cooper. Outside of that, that's been it. A lot of distractions, a lot of different things going on. So I'm really curious to hear what Rick has to say about it, because I know from the player standpoint, I hated the way it was done, but I understand it's a business and that's how these things work.
Yeah, and Rick, as a former GM, how do you feel like the Raiders have handled this situation?
Well, it's a new regime, new head coach, new GM, and he did struggle in this offense for whatever reason. And is it fair to say if he would have stayed in another year or two, he would have gotten more accustomed and more comfortable in the offense? But when you have a new regime come in, they're going to try to make change. Now, the question I have is, I think Derek Carr can go to another team. Let's say if he was on the Jets this year, where the Jets made the playoffs, or if Tom Brady leaves Tampa, does he end up down there? Does he end up with the Washington Commanders? There is a lot of teams that need a quarterback like Derek Carr that already have a lot of pieces in place. And I think wherever he ends up, he's going to have great success. But that contract's an issue. The draft compensation's an issue. I wouldn't be surprised, unlike different than Garoppolo last year, that he forces their hand to cut him and then let him go out and pick the best place for him. So it'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds. But I think if he gets with one of those teams I just mentioned, that they have a legit shot to do some damage in the playoffs.
To Rick's point, he does have that no trade clause. Mm-hmm. So even if they were trying to orchestrate a trade and however they want to work out the numbers, and again, Rick can speak to that as far as how much the Raiders be willing to pay maybe in exchange for, draft picks and all that, he would have to ultimately approve it. So this could be leading down a path where maybe they can't find the right trade partner or trade compensation. He ends up getting released, and he still in the end ends up having his pick. I
want to get Rick's take on that and where you could see potentially him landing. But first, for you, Brady, where does it make sense for him to go?
Rick just mentioned it. I mean, the Jets are a team that, he kind of posed the question, do they make the playoffs? I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Yes, they do. If Derek Carr is their quarterback, I think he'd give a much better quarterback play, even with the struggles that he demonstrated this season in Josh McDaniels' offense, which I think any quarterback who's played within that system, it's a lot on the quarterback's shoulders, especially in year one. You go through the years of quarterbacks who started out in that system in year one. Usually it takes some time to get going in it. So he had an uphill battle as it was, even with the addition of Davante Adams. But you sent him to the New York Jets with that defense, with that running game. I think with their offensive line healthy too, that's a place, in my opinion, where I really feel like he could excel. And I know in saying that, it basically spells the end for Zach Wilson there. Mm-hmm. But I think the writing was probably on the wall already, regardless of what Robert Saleh wants to say publicly, with the way they handled things this past season.
So you look at what the Raiders were able to accomplish this past season, going 6-11. They missed the playoffs again. The postseason, they had some success last year, or at least they got to the postseason last year. But who do they turn to now in their quarterback position, Rick? I mean, who would be a good starting quarterback for Las Vegas, in the 2023 season?
Is Brady? Are you still training? Because they're going to need
throw
somebody.
Him in there.
I'll hold a clipboard, Rick. I'll hold a clipboard for you guys.
You have any names, Rick?
I don't know where they're going to turn to, whether it's Stidham, but if they're going to start rebuilding, I think they're out of the running of maybe the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft class. And knowing Josh McDaniels, knowing how coming out of New England tree, they usually lean towards a veteran. So maybe they end up going back and getting a Jimmy Garoppolo who's quite familiar with this system. So it'll be a musical chair type situation, I think, this offseason with all these vet quarterbacks coming available in the market. So, if they're going to move on, which they're moving on from Derek Carr, it's going to have to be someone who is Josh McDaniels is very familiar with and very familiar with this system.
You hit the nail on the head right there, Rick, because I think that was part of the struggles that Josh probably had this year, their lack of successes. It was a new system for Derek Carr, and it does put a lot on the quarterback's plate. He controls everything out there at the line of scrimmage as far as the run blocking scheme, pass blocking scheme, changing routes, audibles, everything within the check with me system. So it's a lot, especially if you come from a different vernacular running more of a West Coast system. You mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it'd be a great fit. Can I throw another one at you, Rick? What about Tom Brady? You know, depending on how things finished out here with the Bucs. I mean, come on. Think with your heart and head here. I'd love to see a reunion between him and Josh McDaniels with all the success they had.
Well, maybe they can finish games in, and they'd be in the playoffs as well. So, yeah, I mean, Tom Brady, anyone who was associated with New England who has a relationship with Josh McDaniels, that's going to be the best fit. Now, Tom Brady would be older than Pete Prisco, but if he still goes out there and can play at a high level, that maybe that's an option as well.
I didn't know anyone was actually older than Pete Prisco.
Oh,
Pete's the oldest person that I know.
You know what Rick just did there?
What?
He basically said, you know, that's not my gig now, bud.
Here's what I love about Rick, though, is Rick has been working with us for a little time. This is my first time actually I get to work with Rick, so I'm excited about this. But he already knows you got to take jabs at Pete
Prisco already.
That's part of the CBS family. So there you go, Rick.
It's the first thing you learn.
The CBS punching bag. Why don't you take a shot at Pete?
Pete, we love you. We love you. And guys, thank you. We have much more to come with the two of you. So Derek Carr bidding farewell to Las Vegas. There's more on this situation, plenty more, and you can catch it all on the Pick Six podcast. Our guys getting you up to speed in about 30 minutes each day. Their latest pod, Will Brinson and Brady Quinn, who's sitting right next to me now, discussing their top storylines of the week. Check it out.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.